Apto got started because originally I had a service-based business model that was the predecessor to Apto. I was working as a consultant for language and cultural instruction and providing some community-based concierge services for expats who were inbound to the United States. I worked with companies here locally such as Nissan, Cummins, Caterpillar, just to name a few. And I worked with expats from all over the globe. But I did have a lot of clients who were from Japan and Asia, but specifically Japan. The reason that I decided to take Apto from a service-based business model to an online technology platform was because I had many clients who said, Traci, I love the way you teach, because you teach me about language and culture in a real context. Like, we would go out into the community and we would learn about ordering in a restaurant by being in a restaurant, and we would learn about social nuances by interacting at a party, and we'd take them to get their driver's license and things of that nature. So they said, the way you teach, I love it, it's so effective, but it's so time consuming. I wish I had something like this online, and I wish I had it before I came. And literally, you hear enough internationals tell you that, it's like the light bulb starts to go off, because it didn't matter what country they were coming from, they were saying some version of that exact same statement over and over again. And the reason why they said that was because you don't know what you don't know. And so no matter how educated you are prior to a relocation or prior to working, in a new cross-cultural environment, or in a new setting where you don't hear your native language every day, no matter how much you think you know, there's so much that you don't know that has to do with the context of learning that language or culture in a regional environment or a localized setting. So, for example, in the United States, many of you know that, there's a big difference just between New Hampshire and North Carolina, or Tennessee and California, for example. And some regions of the US are like a country unto themselves, right? Like southern Louisiana or Alabama or Texas, for example. So that was part of the difficulty that the end users were having. And so when we developed Apto, we actually created the original user story with Takashi-san in mind. So you may have seen the little cartoon, the problem and solution cartoon that shows Takashi-san, checking at the checkout counter, and he experiences he walks up to the counter with his things, and the caption is like, Takashi-san had a 900 on his TOEIC, and the best scores on his exams for English, but then he arrives in rural Tennessee or the Mid-South somewhere, or the Deep South somewhere, and he gets to the cash register, and the girl's like, "That'll be 1822, won't you swipe your card for me, darling?" And Takashi-san is like, "Huh?" And he gets the very confused face. And there's so many things to unpack in that one single transaction. Now, one is he's hearing a regional dialect that he's not familiar with. It's not what he was trained for. He was in Japan and most of Asia and many places in the world, it's very formal English that you're trained for, kind of rote English. So he was experiencing that at the same time that there was, an interaction that he wasn't used to, like swipe my card, what does that mean? So there's these verbal phrases that have grown up out of, technology usage that he's not familiar with. Then there's this cultural element, like, darling, why is this, woman I don't even know calling me darling? If he can even detect or understand what she's saying. So whenever we would show this cartoon, like at a trade show or a conference, or just used to have it on the back of the business cards, people from all over the world would be like, "That's me." And so we started to discover that somehow Apto was, which means adapt, by the way, was getting to the heart of what people really needed with language study, and that was to be able to adapt, or to learn language with a purpose specific to their needs, and a specific location and time and reason for learning a language. For example, an expat who is coming to the United States from Japan, or going from the United States to the UAE, is going to have a different need for learning language and culture than their spouse, for example, which may need more community-based or social-based interactions, whereas the expat employee themselves is mostly concerned with professional interactions and more limited community or social-based interactions. And then of course their children need something from an academic setting along with the social interactions. And so we originally did a lot of user testing and research with my clients for my service-based business model to get to the heart of that original user story. So back to Takashi-san, our original user story was developed around an Asian man, in this case Japanese specifically, 41, 42, somewhere in that range, you know, that professional mid-30s to mid-40s range, who was bringing a family with him. And so when we began Apto, we were very focused on the niche-specific aspects of relocating expats internationally, and particularly inbound to the United States. As our story has grown, we've expanded that reach to also include short-term travelers of all kinds, including tourists, as well as university students, and then of course virtual communications, because 66% of all companies have some kind of cross-cultural element to them, and there are many, many multinational organizations who have to succeed across borders, even though no one may be actually relocating or even traveling physically. Now in our global community with technology the way it is, they're communicating via conference calls and video hangs and chats and through email on a consistent daily basis. And so there are challenges that they face to accomplishing business goals and sometimes personal goals based on those differences. What happened next in the process was I realized that this need existed and I wanted to begin researching the market. And my original goal was not to start a company, but rather just to find a solution for my clients in my service-based business model, some type of online technology component that I could use to meet those needs, those requests that they had for exposure to scenario-based or context-based learning prior to arrival. Through that process, I encountered a book by a premier cultural anthropologist by the name of Gary Ferraro. And he was speaking exactly to these needs. And basically, there's a quote that talks about the importance of local language, that this is not something that happens at the countrywide level or even the overall target language level. Language and culture happening contextually in very nuanced ways, day in and day out, and constantly evolving within very small pockets and communities. And this really spoke to me because I thought about my learners that were in Davidson County and how they even were having different experiences from Williamson County and how that was different from people that were out in Murfreesboro, and that's all within like a 30-40 mile radius. That was when the light really started to turn on for me, and I realized, well, only with technology can we really simulate these experiences in advance and tag content based, geolocated content, so based on location, to be able to give them the most unique experience possible. The main key differentiators of Apto, which we've had on our mind since inception, are the following. We are the only online experiential learning company that simulates real scenarios in real places using real authentic people, live action video content that the end user interacts with. And they get to choose their learning path. They get to decide what their priorities are. We combine language, culture, local knowledge, and even industry-specific related training and jargon to be able to create that experience so that one individual learner who may be may have a goal, can learn language with a purpose when he or she needs it, in the moment that they need it, in advance. And it really takes a lot of the fear out of the equation. It also reduces the time and the costs associated with learning a language. And that's how we arrived at Apto. And Apto, again, means adapt. So we want our learners to adapt like a pro. And our mission is to empower and support internationals from anywhere in the world to be able to adapt to local communities and environments everywhere and anywhere in the world.